10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
With that, we ease right into Kerbalcast, episode 17, The Big Letdown.
I've been trying to catch you boys all day!
Well, you did, and here we are. I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and with us as always, our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Coming up in today's program, we'll update you on our progress within the game.
We have Dark Mushrooms, Dark Matter.
And we'll have our mission briefing, where we take a look at your letters, and also the latest news about Kerbal.
DK's Modder's Minute.
And, but I digress.
Garbage day!
Trust us, it'll make sense when you hear it.
And we have another Shea challenge.
Yay!
Yay.
Well, before we get into the podcast proper, I guess, I do want to throw out a big thanks to Miguel Pena, Max Maps with Squad. He was on the podcast last week and told us some details about the upcoming update, 0.25. Actually told us quite a bit of information.
Yeah.
It was amazing how much difference it makes to have someone from Squad on the podcast. Do you know that I don't know if I've told you this, do you know that in less than 24 hours, we did triple the number of downloads than we had the entire previous week?
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it was like, well, we posted it Tuesday night.
Yeah, and then it was posted in the DevNote Tuesdays.
Yeah, and I woke up Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
And you know, and because I just, you know, periodically I'll just check the downloads, and you know, and I just, you know, I figure, you know, it'll be, you know, as usual.
Uh-huh.
And I clicked on the button and it was like, what the
whole thing's
heck?
on fire.
It was like, what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just the brief. I think it was within the first 12 hours we had already doubled the previous week's number of downloads.
Yeah. Well, most of our episodes, they average around the same number.
Yeah.
Except we have two anomalies, which is, this one, which, I mean, there's definite reason why it has so many.
Max Maps.
But then we have episode 6.
Yeah.
Episode 6 has more downloads than any other episode we've done.
Yeah, by far.
By far. Excluding the most recent one.
Right.
So excluding the Max episode, episode 6 carries the most downloads, like over double.
Yeah.
And we couldn't really figure out why. I mean, it's like our Empire Strikes Back or something. It's just like really good episode. But then,
Nos, I am your father.
No! It's not possible.
It's not. That's not true. That's impossible.
But it had so many downloads. But the interesting part is about half to 2/3 of our downloads are usually from the U.S. Mm-hmm. But episode 6, 2/3 of it is Canada.
Yeah, for some reason, Canada loves episode 6.
Yeah, Canada, you have that one conquered.
Yeah.
So here's our challenge, that if you can overthrow Canada in episode 6 downloads.
Blame Canada.
Or Canada, see what other episode you can lay claim to. So just you have 6, your flag is planted.
Yeah.
So it's time to move on and raise that countryside.
Yeah, Nos was, because I kept pointing out to him, I said, I don't get this. Episode 6, for some reason, every week racks up this tremendous amount of downloads. And he said, well, where is it being downloaded? And our podcast service allows us to look at the geography of where the podcast is being downloaded. So I clicked it, and Canada, it's like he said, it was like 2/3 of the downloads were Canada.
Yeah, and so we checked some other episodes. It's like, how much does Canada listen to us? And
like,
all the other ones, it's like they were, 1/3 at most, but they just conquered episode 6. That was theirs.
For some reason, they really like...
Yeah.
They really like episode. You know what? There's probably some guy on the street in Canada, you know, and he's probably got like bootleg copies of episode 6. He's going, come on, man. Come on. Premium Kerbalcast, man.
What's funny is my girlfriend's grandparents, they heard about, me doing a podcast. They're like, oh, you'll take a listen to it. And I was like, well, I mean, you guys don't play the game, but I mean, if you guys want to listen to it just for humor's sake, you could try it out. And they said, okay, just recommend us an episode. And we're on episode 11 at that point. And so I was looking through the episodes. I just need to find a good one, not too long, pretty good content. I was like, oh, I'll send him episode 6. And then the next day, I tell Biff about it, and he's like, yeah, that's our most downloaded episode. Yeah. And then my first thought was, they downloaded it that much? I was like, they only need to listen to it once.
Well, your girlfriend has a big family.
Yeah, apparently in Canada.
Apparently, they all live in Canada. Well, do you want to go ahead and get into our progress report?
Yeah. First off, welcome to any new listeners we have. And
Yeah, absolutely.
If you haven't listened to any previous episodes, we might recommend episode 6. But on top of that,
reason.
The premise of our podcast is that Biff has been playing the game for over a year now, and he has totaled, how many hours are you at now?
I looked, it was 720-something or other.
Yeah, 720-something or other hours, and I just started playing the game from episode 1,
Yeah.
so I had no previous knowledge of this game at all, and like I'd heard
He's
of it.
a noob.
So I just started, and I'm
Make me a sandwich.
I'm a little over the 50-hour mark, which is pretty shameful for being 17 episodes in, but there were some weeks I had where I was like, oh, I can only put in 1 or 2. So
You get a pass simply because I know what your schedule looks like.
yeah,
You know,
it's pretty
I mean,
nightmarish.
for you to be able to scratch out 50 hours.
Yeah, see, the thing is with my
Because, I mean, you work around the clock, you travel, girlfriend. So,
all these distractions, I need to
yeah,
stop.
you got all the... And then, of course, the really picky stuff, like for some reason you insist on sleeping.
Yeah.
There's this whole eating thing. I don't get that.
Like, I could forgive one of them, but,
Yeah.
I just I try to get away with
Sleeping and eating? No,
I think
come
one
on,
of the
pick
things-
one, boy.
Is like you sit down with Kerbal and you want to play for hours.
Yeah.
I usually only have around an hour here or there to play. Mm-hmm. So, like, I sit down, it's kind of hard to play for an hour because, like, I finished building something and I chart out my plan to do it, and then it's like, okay, now save all of that, and I'll come back and do it the next time I'm able to play. But, so I've been pretty new. So for our progress report, we talk about our experience in the game. Do you want to go ahead and start off?
Sure, I can start. I have spent the week, I told you in the last podcast that I had gotten to Jewel for the very first time.
Yeah.
Ever. Period. Prior to that, I had only been to Eve and to Duna, and then, of course, the Assorted Moons and whatever. In our last podcast, there had been some discussion about two things. There'd been discussion about a more efficient launch profile, and also there was some discussion about interplanetary transfer. And that's what I've been doing this week, is I've been experimenting with both of those, and I've gotten pretty good about getting to Duna. I'm sorry, I said Duna. I've gotten pretty good about getting to Jewel.
You've been good about getting to Duna, too.
Yeah, well, that's true. I have. It's actually kind of funny. When we started talking about interplanetary transfer, and I started hearing people discuss, like, the most efficient ways, once again, the way I've been doing it has been completely wrong. It's like every time somebody goes, well, what's the best way to launch? It's like, oh, completely wrong. What's the best way to get to another planet? Completely wrong.
Yeah.
Everything that there is to do in this game, I have done completely wrong up to this point. But I keep learning and I keep correcting. But yeah, I've learned how to make more efficient transfers from Kerbin to Jewel. What I'm still trying to do, I've got a manned craft that is in orbit right now around Lathe, and I'm trying to get another tanker there. I've already gotten one and did refuel, but I need to get another one there. And the problem is by the time I get the tanker there, usually the tanks are pretty dry. So I've got the transfer part down. I need to be either sending bigger ships, or I need to be more efficient in getting there.
Yeah.
Because, the whole point of a tanker is actually getting there with something in the tank. The other thing that I've been messing around with is launch profile. What we had been doing, you and I were both doing this, we would launch straight off the ground. We would burn at 100% until our nav ball switched over to orbit, and then we would lean 90 degrees and circularize our orbit. Well, we found out in the last podcast that it's more efficient to go up to about 10,000 meters and pitch over to about 45 degrees, and don't burn at 100% until you get there, and then go to 100% and then circularize your orbit. And I have been messing around with that. It is much more efficient. The thing I've discovered, though, is some ships you can burn 100% off the ground and You never exceed like 100 meters per second, and it gets you right up to 10,000 meters. And then you do your pitch over and you circularize your orbit, and it's perfect. And then with some other ships from the ground into orbit, you've got to constantly be adjusting your ship. The easiest plain Jane way to do it is to burn 50% straight off the ground until about 10,000 meters, pitch over to 45, go to 100% thrust, and then circularize your orbit. There's other options, and we'll talk about them in today's program. There's other options you can do. But those require a lot more effort. One last thing I will mention. One of the tankers that I sent to Jewel, I tried to aero brake around Jewel, thinking that I could, save some fuel.
Yeah.
Well, I got too close, and so my aero braking turned into just braking. Because it was like right at the point, it's like when I got right to, when I got right to that point where I was just skimming the atmosphere, it's like all of a sudden, re-entry flames, and I just went straight into the atmosphere.
No.
And because Kerbal Space Program is for the inner pyromaniac in all of us.
Yeah.
I just wrote it down. Honestly, I could have F9'd and gone back to my previous save.
Yeah.
But it was more like, I want to watch this.
Yeah. This is going to be good.
Yeah, and I just wrote it down. And what's cool about Jewel is that when you do actually get to the surface, you go under it.
Huh.
And so, I'm just sitting there watching my tanker, and eventually you get to where, your altitude is minus whatever, and the whole thing just explodes. And I was like, cool! And I was doing screenshots all the way down.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my progress. Blowing up over Jewel and playing around with lunch and interplanetary transfer. So what is your... I saw you... when I was playing, I actually got a notification. Steam popped up and said... NOS is playing Kerbal Space Program.
You had a unicorn sighting right there.
Yeah, I had a unicorn sighting.
The chances that we're ever playing things at the same time is so limited.
Oh, yeah.
It's like because we have opposite schedules. But, I managed to get quite a few hours in last night and the night before.
What did you do?
Okay, so the first thing I did a lot of part testing,
Okay.
just to get some money because I had big plans.
So you're in contract mode.
Yeah, I'm doing it in contract mode.
Or career mode, I guess.
What mode did you do yours in?
When I started building, you remember when we got the Shea challenge way back when?
Yeah.
About the landing on as many planets as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I had been building that giant spaceship in orbit, and I was in sandbox mode.
Makes sense.
And when I got the Shea challenge, I went ahead and just continued in sandbox mode because I decided I was going to go ahead and finish the craft that I already had in orbit and use that. And of course, we've already heard about those misadventures. Word to the novice, don't build something so big that it won't move. But anyway, so I was in sandbox mode, and I've just been in sandbox mode since.
Oh, okay.
So anyway,
so I was playing in just standard career contract mode. Mm-hmm. So I was completing a couple contracts and making some money, and then I, some of it was getting science from around Kerbin, so I took that up, and I made big on what I said I would do last week. I made something that landed upside down, and I put a nose cone on it, and I just held the Q key.
Did you make a spinny?
And I retracted the legs, and it spun. And it spun for a long time before it fell over. And then when it fell over, it didn't necessarily blow up. It just kind of traveled. Like, it was spinny until it rolly. You know,
you have invented a whole new sport within the game.
Yeah.
Breakdancing.
The thing was going pretty good. And then, you know what was cool? You would hit the gear things again, and the legs would pop out, and it would stop. So it's like whenever you're doing your head spin when you break dancing, and then you stop. So it was pretty sweet. And
you made a spinny.
Yeah, whenever the nose cone was attached to the top of the command pod, and what's funny is you start to see it like move oblong around it.
Right.
Like it starts to push itself toward the edge of the nose cone because it's not actually affixed to the center of the nose cone when it's experiencing that much G-force, like pushing it like that. So it was weird looking, but I mean, it still stayed centered on the
center point.
Yeah, the center point of the nose cone. So that was a stupid thing I did. And then I was like, okay, so I've had this Explore the Mun contract sitting here forever. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
And I said, I want to figure out if I can do it in the fewest parts and stages that I can. As few stages as possible. The cool thing about this contract, and I didn't realize it until I started doing it. So I built this. I built the lander that I did whenever I first landed on the Mun. The very first time I did it in science mode, and I realized how expensive and how heavy that thing was.
Right.
Like it was just extensively heavy and hard to manage. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make the simplest lander I can. So it was basically a command pod, a fuel can, the 50 max thruster, landing legs, and all.
You still haven't done Rendezvous yet.
No.
Okay. So you're basically.
It's just, man. Practicing Rendezvous was like abysmally depressing for me. So I wanted to stay away from it, and still, I want to do that one stage.
I told you that when I was trying to learn Rendezvous, I actually got to the point where I had to take a couple of weeks break from it because the fun factor had just siphoned completely out of it.
You're learning this really hard thing. Once you get it, it's fine. But until then, it's like, man, this is just not fun.
Yeah.
So, I launched my craft, and I built this thing incredibly minimalist. There were a total of 5 stages.
Okay.
I think I could have narrowed it down to... No, I narrowed it down to 4 stages.
And I want to make sure I'm clear. Your intent here, you were going to leave Kerbin, go to the Mun, land, and then return to Kerbin, all with one ship.
That's the plan.
Okay.
And I'd done it before, but that thing was like massive. And I didn't have access to as many of the giant fuel tanks and stuff like that. So I was really wondering, I was like, I know people have made it to the Mun before without these massive, like the Rokomax tanks that are just huge.
Right.
That's what I was using that time. And I was just launching this gigantic thing to get this little bitty pod on top of the Mun. I was like, there's got to be a simpler way to do it. And so... Was that the mic hit?
No, that was actually the elbow.
Oh, we got an elbow drop.
Yeah, we got an elbow drop
from the top rope.
Yeah, but I can hit the mic if you want.
No.
There we go.
So
mic hits are only funny if they're unintentional.
Yeah, unintentional. So I had I built this thing, I launched it, and I did the, once I hit 10,000, I, kitted over to 45, which I had to revert a couple times because I was going to the wrong 45, because it throws me off that usually whenever you're playing something or involved in anything, north is the top of the screen.
Right.
With this, it's actually the north is facing you on the nav ball. So in order to hit the same rotation as the Mun, I had to actually, from where it was positioned when you first enter launch, I had to position it 45 degrees to the right, so I could get that.
What about to the left?
Yeah, take it back now, y'all. So I get it up to around 10,000, and then I kit it over, and I realized I didn't put the Separatrons on the boosters that I had. So what I did is, like, the last little bit of thrust, I would just separate them, and so they would launch real far ahead and then fall by the time that I would get there with my smaller thruster.
Have you noticed that a lot of Kerbal stories, at some point, the phrase, but then I forgot whatever part.
It leads to a lot of, like, hilarious failures or massive accomplishments.
Well, usually that part, and usually the I forgot this part comes after spending 20 hours getting into orbit and getting to the Mun. That's when I realized I forgot landing legs.
So this craft that I made was the most fuel efficient thing I've ever done. I've thrown away a lot of fuel, Well,
if you've got just a 50 thrust engine, yeah, you don't need a whole lot of.
Well, that was just for the lander. Yeah. So I had the 215s on my main body of the thing.
Right.
But just like 3, the black and white striped.
The tanks.
Yeah, those tanks. I had the 215 thrusters put onto those tanks. Which I remember the letter we got from Cody C like last week, and like everything I'm saying is probably driving him nuts because it's not called thruster. So I'm sorry, I meant to cut that part out of the letter and like put it up as a chart I could look at and like, okay, I'll get this right.
Well, part of what we're doing is we're trying to use, we're trying to be as simple as we can.
Yeah.
Because listening to somebody talk about something.
Yeah.
Versus reading. And
that guy works for NASA.
Yeah.
So like I gotta say half the things we say are probably driving him nuts.
Yeah.
It's like, so then I got the fire shooter launched up my person can up into the, But I get it positioned right, and I start, I get a orbit around Kerbin, and then I build this oblong orbit that intersects the Mun, and I just time warp until it just happens to intersect.
Right.
I intersect with the Mun. I retrograde burn to close an orbit around that, and then I get like a straight down orbit, and I disconnect the thing, and I land it, and I transmit my science. The cool thing about that Mun contract, which I didn't know, is with most of the contracts, you have to meet all the parameters, and when you do, you get the contract, like the award. With this one, when you do any part of that contract, you get the reward for that part of the contract.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so it was like, get orbit around the Mun, and all of a sudden I get a notification. I was like, I didn't complete the contract yet. It's like, no, you completed one part. It's a 4-part contract. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I land, and it's like, got me that. And it's like, transmit science from around and, and from the ground. I wonder,
question. I wonder if you get like the that part of the contract, and then let's say you crash and you start the contract again, does your orbit?
Oh, like,
I wonder if that accomplishment.
Like, let's say I completed 3 parts of it, and then I cancel the contract and start it again.
Right. I wonder if those.
I don't know.
That's interesting. That would be interesting to know.
On my one flight, I got the science. I got the orbit around Kerbin, part of the contract. I got transmitted science from that orbit, part of the contract. And I was doing this with crew reports because they transmit 100%. I don't want to transmit mystery goo and not get all the science from it. Landed on the Mun, part of the contract. Last part of the contract, transmit science from or recover it, which would bring it home. But I want to transmit it in case I don't make it.
Okay.
So I go to transmit it out of electrocharge, and I was like, oh. So I launched another one, and to answer that question, as far as launching another one, I don't know about canceling, but I launched another one, and those 3 parts of the contract were still completed, and I still had the money from them.
Okay.
So I launched another identical vessel. I didn't revert, and I equipped it with solar panels.
Okay.
Because
I wondered if you had solar panels.
Well, what was cool is I didn't originally.
Okay.
But it's like how I learned to stop worrying and love the contract.
Yeah.
Now before where I did that giant sun exploration to get a ton of science to just buy all the stuff I wanted.
Right.
Now if I complete contracts, I get some science. So I know it's what they intended, and now I'm finally falling in love with it. It's like okay, I get it now. Before I was like, and it's also what was corrected, what some people told me. I didn't want to get science and then be told I have to go get that science again and then not be able to. But it turns out the contract still completes if you do that. So now what's funny is I could go do that sun thing and still go do it later whenever a contract asks for it. But I don't want to now because I'm getting science from my contracts. I'm getting science from, just general exploration. So I go there, and this time I have solar panels because I was able to afford them from the 3 previous parts of that contract. I get it going. But I wanted to put more fuel on there because I still had enough fuel. I didn't have enough electric charge on the first one to transmit. Right. But I still had the ability to activate parts of my ship. Okay. But I didn't have enough fuel to get the lander home. Okay. So I launched another one with an extra fuel can and now solar panels and stuff.
Was it a manned lander?
This one, the second one was not because I was like, hey, I could go pick up the guy I have stranded there.
Okay.
And this drives
So
me...
you were trying to land in the same spot?
Close.
Okay.
Yeah, get somewhere.
You wanted to be within running distance.
Yeah, I could just put him in the command pod and roll over there if I really had to. Which is dangerous on the Mun.
Yeah.
It's dangerous. And so I get there, and the extra weight canceled out the extra fuel.
Oh, nice.
So I land the second one, and I have enough electric charge, but barely enough fuel. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, I didn't land in a good spot, and I ended up falling over and flailing around for a little bit before eventually I was like, okay, it's not happening. And then parts of the ship blew up. So now I currently have 2 command pods on the Mun. And now one of them, you're like, oh, well, that one's a probe core, right?
Right.
No, it was that same thing that happened every time I would go back to adjust something. a Kerbal would jump in the pod. It's driving me nuts. Because every time I'd have to go check, did I get...
Me.
I would hit launch, and then Bill would be down there like, no, Bill, get out. And so I would go and like kick him out and have to double make check, before I launch again. And you know what happened?
Oh, no.
I didn't check. So now there's 2 command pods, each with a Kerbal in it, just sitting on the mud. And I was like, all right, that's what you get, Bill. That's what you get.
Are they close together?
No.
No? Okay.
No. They're...
So they can't even hang out together?
No. But here's the good news. Since Bill was in there, and I had the solar panels, I was able to transmit the science and finish the contract.
Okay.
So
cool.
Not good news for them.
Yeah.
But at least Bill's... Bill being so adamant about jumping in that command pod despite all of my attempts to get him out.
That's what he gets.
Yeah, but at least he served a purpose.
Yeah.
So
well, and also, what is it? About 3 days, and he'll pop back up.
Yeah. Which I'm thinking about staging like a rescue mission. Seeing if I can go pick him up. And leave enough empty seats. Yeah, I guess
that was early on when I was playing the game. That was one of the things that I was trying to do. Was I was trying to land in the same spot.
Yeah,
and that's especially early on. That's more difficult than you think.
Mm-hmm. The best way I could think up was to get an orbit that goes over it, and then whenever you get in the right spot, retrograde burn until it goes straight down above it.
Yeah. Well, I learned that when you're in map view and it's showing you your orbital path, you can set it to where your orbital path will terminate exactly where you want it to be, but then as you come down, that path keeps adjusting, and pretty soon the path that you thought was going to put you right on the money ends up putting you like way away.
Yeah, because you do things to counter, especially if you're trying to land on curb and you hit that chute, and it's like it kills whatever trajectory you were on.
So yeah, I got to where I could land pretty close, but yeah, for a while there it was like no.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but so whenever I would try to build a node to get whenever I was trying to, I'm orbiting Kerbin,
right,
and I want to leave, the best time to leave is right whenever I'm about to hit the periapsis. So if I wanted to make something, and
because you're taking advantage of all the speed you've picked up.
So if I want to make a drop on a planet, like I want to land on a planet and I want that to be straight down, the best time to retrograde burn would be the top of the apoapsis.
As long as you're not trying to hit a specific spot, yes.
Yeah. So okay. So if I line my apoapsis, like if I want to just land straight down, the least fuel I could burn was okay. So I did that right. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, if I'm going my fastest, I don't want to take advantage of that speed. If I want to burn the least fuel, I want to burn it when I'm slowest.
Yeah.
So I take it top of the apoapsis.
Yeah, because when you go from apoapsis to periapsis, you're going basically downhill. Yeah. And you're picking up speed. And then periapsis to apoapsis, you're going uphill, so you're losing speed.
Yeah.
So you get, if you're trying to slow down, it's more efficient at your apoapsis.
Yeah. Well, you just remember it. It's like if I'm moving away from A, I'm accelerating.
Right.
If I'm moving away from P, I'm pretty much slowing down.
Very good. I like that.
That's pretty forced, though.
A mnemonic device. Hey, it works, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so A for acceleration and P for pretty slow.
Pretty slow.
Okay.
So if whichever one you're moving from, that's what you're doing.
The entire podcast listenership now has that stuck in their heads.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For better or for worse.
Oh, the other thing I discovered this week, you heard that, what is it, Google bought Twitch for what, $1 billion?
Yeah.
Was it Google? I think it was Google. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Was it Amazon?
Or maybe it was Amazon.
There was a big discussion over which one would do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, some bigwig bought Twitch for $1 billion. And I discovered that while I'm at work, because I'll usually listen to music while I'm at work. I've discovered that if you, depending on the feed, but watching, you can bring up Twitch TV and watch that as just kind of background noise, and that's nice.
Yeah,
that's kind of a neat thing. One thing that I did notice though, one of the Twitch channels that I was watching, it was a girl gamer, and she was playing Kerbal for the first time, I believe. And the thing I noticed was how much difference there was in the comment section. Because when it's guys that are playing the game, there's a lot of, first of all, there's trash talking, which you're going to get anywhere.
That's gaming.
Yeah, that's gaming. But there was also a lot of discussion about what he was doing, and there was a lot of, hey, you should do this, and, whatever. With her, there was a lot of, ooh, I like your hair, and your hair's pretty.
What?
And, yeah, and it was, is that your real hair color? And, and I was just going...
That's like whenever they were asking questions to like the actors in the Avengers, they're like, so what, so Robert Downey Jr., what mental state did you have to get in order to, really portray Iron Man, Tony Stark as he interacted with the Hulk. And
then Scarlett Johansson. So tell us about that leather cat suit.
Yeah, how much weight did you have to lose? And it's like, come on. They're both people who do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like... It's like the only way they know how to discuss the things like, oh, I think this is what's important to these people. I just,
I was watching that and I was seeing the comments and I was thinking, can you imagine, like, let's say, let's say I was doing a Twitch TV or something. I mean, people would be writing in going, is that your real hair color?
Yeah. And it's like, oh, where do you buy your shirt? That's really nice.
Yeah. Tell me about your weight loss program. Because it's obviously not working. I just, that kind of stuff. And I mean, she handled it with good humor.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, that kind of stuff would just drive me nuts.
Yeah. It's like, I'm here and I'm playing a video game.
Yeah.
And that's like,
well, you know how they talk about, like geek girl or, or girl gamer or something like that. It's like the operative, it's like she's a girl gamer instead of a gamer girl.
Yeah.
If you get what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, she was a girl first and a gamer second, whereas with everybody else, they're gamers.
And
I just, that stuff just kind of gets to you after a while.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, anonymity breeds some of the worst.
Yeah.
Breeds some of the worst habits, and that's one of them. It would be nice if that if that went away.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on now that we're done trying to change the world. Once again, Dark Mushroom is joining us this week, and he's got another episode of Dark Matters.
Circling in near-perfect geosynchronous orbit around the Kerbal Podcast comes another edition of Dark Mushroom's Dark Matter. I'm Dark Mushroom, and today we launch part 1 of a 3-part series on maneuvers so daunting that even the most brilliant minds at NASA didn't get it right the first time. Rendezvous and docking. This series assumes you are familiar with efficiently getting into and circularizing an orbit around Kerbin. So let me give you a common scenario. Jebediah would like to prepare for a transfer to Duna and decides to put a fuel tank into orbit in one launch and send up her ship on the next. The key to any successful rendezvous is having a stable, slowly orbiting target. The word target for the remainder of this series means the stationary and active body you are docking with, as the phrase directly corresponds to its use in-game. First, you must prepare a launcher and a payload, the launcher being the ship half that will get you into orbit, and the payload that you will be docking with later. Your stack will typically go launcher, Sepratron, docking port, a payload lined with 3 or more RCS ports, RCS fuel, a probe, and some solar panels. Be sure to add some struts around the docking port for stability, and you're ready to launch. Now for the easy part. Perform your launch, pitching 45 degrees east above 10 kilometers and 180 degrees, or directly east above 60 kilometers. Then, after obtaining orbit, manipulate your periapsis and apoapsis to be as close to 100 kilometers as possible. Sitting in your nice, equatorial, circularized orbit, you can now finalize the positioning of your payload. My favorite way to do this is to turn facing away from Kerbin, separate so your launcher slowly sinks back to the planet, and face your probe polar, directly north. This provides a solid point of reference for aligning your chaser, the ship that will be docking with this target, in the next episode. You are now prepared for a rendezvous mission. While you contemplate the enormous combination of engineering and aviation skill it took to get this far, feel free to send any questions to me at darkmushroom87 on Twitter or by emailing kerbalpodcast@gmail.com with the subject line Dark Matter. And remember, in the timeless words of Robert Goddard, the dream of yesterday is the hope of today and the reality of tomorrow.
All right, that was Dark Mushroom with this week's Dark Matters, and that was excellent.
Yeah, that was great.
That was really good.
I'm looking forward to part 2.
Yeah, I had asked him. I told him that Rendezvous is one of those things that perpetually everybody wants to know about.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to knock that out in a minute, but
Yeah.
I mean he's making good progress.
Yeah,
on it.
that's
So
really
I was
good.
like, oh, okay, that's very clear and
He's
concise.
a very good addition to the podcast. Well, thank you very much, Dark Mushroom. Well, let's move on to this week's mission briefing. This is where we read your letters and also our Kerbal news. And do you want to start?
Yeah, we'll go and start with Robin Parker. Dear Biff and Nos, heard about your show in the most recent dev notes on the KSP forum.
Yay!
Hey, thank you for being a new listener. I had originally planned on just listening to your interview with Max Maps, but ended up playing episode 1 instead.
Yay!
Hey, it only gets better from there. So there's a lot of gold. You just got to dig.
Got to dig for the gold.
Normally, I haven't been a big fan of video game podcasts, but I was very surprised and impressed with your show. Oh, thank you.
Well,
I really like how you tied in actual space history and rocketry. Like you mentioned in your show, KSP has an amazing ability to inspire people to become involved with space exploration, and the same enthusiasm hit me too. Well, we're glad it has.
Yeah, very
and
good.
So again, thank you for a great listen and keep up the good work.
That's excellent.
We'll just read that letter every podcast.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, I just feel good.
I'm going to read that every night before I go to sleep. And then I'll have sweet dreams.
Yeah.
Next letter. This comes from North Star 1989. Greetings to the Kerbalcast team. I just discovered your podcast program, and I'm glad I did. I find your particular combination of humility, humor, and just general goodwill towards the listeners very appealing.
I always said my best 2 traits are my greatness and my humility.
Of course. I'll be sure to try to listen to your program more in the future. While listening to the latest podcast, episode 16, I noticed discussion of the best way to get to low Kerbin orbit. The method that was discussed is still very much suboptimal. This is what I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
There's kind of the cookie cutter way, which works every time, and then there's another way that requires more finesse, and this is the more finesse. He says an ideal launch in the vanilla game should indeed proceed more or less straight up for the first 5,000 meters or so to escape the thickest part of the atmosphere. However, instead of reaching 10,000 meters and turning abruptly to 45 degrees and holding this trajectory, a better launch profile involves beginning your turn earlier at about 5,000 meters and very slowly and continuing it throughout the launch. An ideal launch only reaches around 75 degrees by 10,000 meters and does not reach 45 degrees until around 15,000 meters. Like I said, you're finessing this the whole way.
Yeah.
Okay. By 25,000 meters, your rocket should be pointed at about 25 degrees relative to the horizon. And by 32,000 meters, if you've acquired enough upward momentum earlier in your launch, your rocket should only be pointed at about 5 to 10 degrees above the horizon. That part right there, I want to point out, is very important. You need to be watching your apoapsis because if you reach the point where you're starting to drop back into the atmosphere and you're only at about, say, 50,000 meters, you're not going to achieve orbit. You have to be real careful about, you have to make sure that your apoapsis has reached as high as you want your orbit to be, at least, say, 70,000 meters. Preferably better than that, higher than that, because, once you do go up and over and you're trying to circularize, you are going to drop down some, and you want to make sure you have a cushion. So, but yeah, you before you lose your upward momentum, make sure your apoapsis is where you want it to be. Continuing, once your apoapsis reaches the intended altitude of your orbit, you should cut throttle and coast to this point to accelerate further and circularize your orbit. And again, that's a fuel-saving measure. There are several reasons for the slower turn early on. The most important of these for an efficient launch is the fuel efficiency of your rocket. So that's another way of getting to low Kerbal orbit, more efficient but more involved. And this letter actually goes on to talk about interplanetary transfers, but I'm going to save that to the next podcast because I want to kind of make sure that each topic gets its due. What is our next letter?
From Gregrox Munn. I'm a huge fan of the podcast and really love the interview with Max Maps. Hey, we did too.
Yeah, we did.
I have some speculation about the assets the modelers are making. I think they're making cities. 64-ish models would be enough for procedural cities to be scattered around.
This is the big mystery thing that Max Maps was talking about.
Yeah, so like there's something, but nobody's thought of it yet.
Yeah.
Well, so people have made city mods where you could see city lights and stuff, so I don't know.
There's some we're going to get to it. There's some speculation about that.
I have a bit of advice for you as well. Moho is the hardest place in the Kerbaler system to reach. It has no atmosphere for air braking, and it is so close to the sun you expend kilometers per second delta V to get there from low Kerbal orbit. The biggest rocket I ever built could barely get a lander onto Moho. It was supposed to get to Moho and back, but that was a horrible fail. They landed, but Jeb and Bill are not going home.
You know, Moho to me sounds like one of those chocolate drinks.
Oh yeah. It's like kind of like a Yoo-hoo.
Yeah. Yoo-hoo,
You shake
Moho, Yoo-hoo. Just shake it up. I was curious how you were going to pronounce
Kerbaler.
Yeah, because I was alternating between that
Kerbalar.
and Kerbular.
Oh,
Kerbular.
Yeah.
I was like,
Kerbular, dude.
It's totally Kerbular.
Yeah.
And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
They're from space, you know.
They're from space.
According to some of the scripts that
Turtles in space. Okay, moving on. This article comes from primagames.com. And the title of the article was The 10 Most Anticipated Indie Games. And guess what number 5 on the list was?
Ooh,
something about Kerbals? Maybe?
Oh.
Yeah, Kerbal Space Program, number 5 on the list. Quote, another early access title, Kerbal Space Program, lets you create your own space center and ships as you race to successfully make it into space. Physics are the enemy, and the precious lives of your Kerbal space crew are in your hands. Build the fastest, largest, or even most successful space vessel you can, and explore the wide open world waiting for you in the stars. That sounds like a cool game. I want to try it.
yeah. I think I've heard of it somewhere.
Is it out yet?
Yeah.
Because it is anticipated.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
From Wesley Clifford. How timely. I just last weekend uploaded a video to my YouTube channel with the catchy, simple title, Interplanetary Transfers Without Any Transfer Window Calculators.
Yeah, remember we got a request in the last podcast.
Yeah.
Somebody was saying, how do you do the efficient interplanetary transfer? When I was talking earlier about experimenting and trying to get better at it, this was one of the resources I used.
Oh, okay. So yeah, just go ahead and search Interplanetary Transfers Without Any Transfer Window Calculators in YouTube, and you could find it.
We have tweeted the link. We'll also,
did we?
Yes,
Okay.
and we'll also put it on our website.
In the video, I show how, from low Kerbal orbit, you can nail a Duna transfer without looking up any values in a table, on a website, or in a mod. Plan a node to just escape Kerbal. For Duna, you should escape just in front. I use precise node and leave Kerbal usually around 900 to 950 meters a second. Plan a second node on your ship's orbit around the sun, give it enough prograde thrust to reach Duna's orbit, and set Duna as a target. Drag that second node around, you'll have to modify its prograde amount due to the two orbits not being perfect circles, until you actually have an encounter. Delete the first node, KSW will remember the second node's location, but its direction and amount will be totally wrong. Wrap to that maneuver node. Kerbal alarm clock is pretty nice here. DK was telling us about that.
Yeah.
And when you get there, delete it and create a new maneuver node about where you'd have to burn. This node should easily get you to a Duna encounter. You may need to burn normal on ejection. Do it. Do the burn, follow the maneuver node as precisely as you can, lean back and bask in the awesomeness that is you. If you use precise node mod, you can do even better. Talk at you later.
You know, I think that should be the official Kerbal slogan.
Talk at you later?
No, do the burn.
Oh, do the burn.
Do the burn.
Do the burn.
Let's do an entire podcast in Kerbal voice.
Yeah, oh yeah. There we go. It's kind of like the the alternate soundtrack in Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest. Well, if episode 6 and the last episode have our most downloads, that would have our least.
Yeah.
It would be there to establish a baseline.
Yeah, it'll balance it out. We'll grade it on a curve.
It'd be like, well, it was funny for about 30 seconds. And
then, it can kind of died out.
Stop being funny. Okay, moving on. This is a letter from Captain Grog. Hi, Biff and Nos. Hello.
Hello.
A British listener to your podcast here. I'm very much enjoying your weekly shows and have learnt a lot from listening. I think it makes a really nice accompaniment to KSP, and it's kept me engaged with it much longer than I would have normally with a game like this. So, well done. If Squad isn't paying you referral money yet, then they should. I agree with that. No, I still, what I really want, I know this is a long shot, I want them to put 2 Kerbal nuts in the game, Biff and Nos.
Oh, Nos Kerman and Biff Kerman?
Yeah. We could be part of the family.
Yeah.
Captain Grog goes on to say, anyway, down to my question. I've heard you mention a few times over the last episodes about the difficulty of landing accurately on Kerbin in a desired location. We were talking about that earlier, weren't we?
Yeah.
I seem to be able to do it quite well on the Mun, where there is no atmosphere, but always seem to over or undershoot when landing on Kerbin. Can you or your listeners offer any tips for accurate re-entry and landing on a planet like Kerbin? And we have a new sign-off. You ready?
Yeah.
May your launches be rotation-free, and don't forget the battery.
Oh, no, they rhyme now. They rhyme.
I resisted the urge to read the whole letter in, like, the worst Monty Python voice I could think of.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I figured I'd probably, irritate an entire continent. And I figured I'd probably stay away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
'Tis but a flesh wound.
It worked for, just at the apoapsis countering and burning retrograde. Mm-hmm. That worked as far as doing it on the Mun. Trying it on Kerbin to try to establish where you want to stop.
Yeah.
Maybe worth a shot. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I forwarded this question on to Dark Matters. To Dark Mushroom, and it's on his list of topics to get to. But we would also love to hear from the listeners as well.
Yeah.
What advice do you have
for an accurate
for pinpoint landing on Kerbin? You remember the Shea challenge?
Was landing all those. Yeah. With mine, I just would aim for the centers of continents and be like, well, it's going to hit somewhere in there.
I told you I took a screenshot, and there's like a little dot right in the middle, and then way off in the distance is the Kerbal Space Center.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's as close as I got. Okay, what's next?
Okay, this is the KSP subreddit in response to the Max Maps interview.
Yeah. This is what I was talking about.
Okay. So we have a couple different people here. First one is Conis Force. I think it's pretty clear that the admin building is something to exchange science to reputation and cache all those permutations. As to the other thing, where he said there'd be something in 0.25 paving the way for a big update in 0.26, I think it's going to be crew experience. I think the 0.25 rollout is going to be mission stats and tracking for individual Kerman, like Final Frontier. Experienced crews performing docking automatically, or being better at collecting science, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it's almost like it's almost like you building up your stats.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you played FTL, when your little dude would pilot and dodge enough, he would your dodge percentage would go from 15% to 20% because for him being there, you get an extra 5%. So like a Kerbal that had reached a certain amount of experience, say that. Maybe he was on missions that collected a total of 100 science.
I wonder how this would work in a game that is not automated, though, because what you're talking about in FTL is more of an automated feature.
Yeah. I'm saying, like, if they were to adapt it and they did crew experience, like, so let's say you have...
to me, this would translate... The only way this would work would be if it translated into better stats for the ship that you were flying.
Well, no, I could see like take Bill Kerman. Mm-hmm. Bill Kerman has been on a lot of missions, and in total, on all the missions he's been on, he's collected over 100 science.
Right.
That reached a milestone, and he leveled up to where he's like an advanced Kerbal researcher.
Right.
So anytime you'd collect science and he was on the mission, it would increase science by 10%.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So,
okay.
Or
okay.
You'd burn so much RCS with Jebediah at the wheel.
Right.
So you would use 5% less RCS. So as they became more experienced with it, it would change the consumption rates or the amount you would accrue. But the counter to it is their reputation would be so high that if you ever crashed or anything like that, you would lose the bonus,
right?
And you would lose a massive amount of reputation because that was that was your RCS guy or your electrocharge guy who was an electrical engineer, and so you'd use less electrocharge. So I could see them managing resources that way,
right?
If you had so and so on the mission, whenever you recovered parts, they were worth more. So I could see you eventually leveling up certain guys, and not trying to put all your eggs in one basket by having
that would be a nice dynamic, and that's a good balance, because when you get right down to it, yes, it's Bill doing the mission, but I mean, it's really you.
Yeah. Bill doesn't feel different from Dude Goss, which doesn't feel different from Archibald,
right.
But if they had, certain things that they would gain, and maybe on their uniform there's a little badge or something,
right. Well, I think, didn't you make a comment several episodes ago that when you're going through with crew members, the courage and stupidity doesn't really seem to do much.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I haven't really noticed any difference between...
If there is, I haven't noticed it.
Okay.
I think it's just placeholder stats for maybe stuff in the future.
We're admitting our stupidity right up front.
Yeah. I'm courageous about it. Continuing in the KSB subreddit, Jake Height says, I think you're close. The ability to move crew around without EVA to me indicates space station and possibly long-term science experiments. Perhaps they give cash and reputation. Oh, that guy says, so the administration building will provide lots of interplay between the 3 new .24 systems, currency, science, and reputation, that nobody has predicted what it will do yet. Also, 2 new systems which will provide the framework for a huge change in .26, which will be as big or bigger than contracts, according to Max Maps. One of these systems will be avoidable if you play very well, so I'm guessing there will be a negative reputation punishment system and a positive reputation award system. So, if you start to get in the red from burning so much reputation or failed contracts, that you could actually face penalties, which in board gaming and stuff, it's called death spiral, where things start to go bad and they continue to go worse, and there's no way to climb out of it.
Right.
It's kind of like in dodgeball. Once you lose one guy and then you lose another guy, when you're 2 down, it's kind of hard to get back out.
There's a lot of MMOs where you it's like you'll take a hit to your stats.
Yeah.
And then what happens is that makes you weaker and less effective. And so you keep losing your stats keep going down and down and down, and it becomes harder and harder to climb out of it. So yeah, the death spiral.
And it makes sense in certain fighting games or RPG games, because your experience is you're controlling a person, and as a person gets beat up, they become less effective at things. But in a simulation game, to hear that it's like, oh, well, your reputation got so low that you now have less money, it's like, well, how do I get out of it?
Yeah.
It's like, you can't go below 0 funds, but you can be so unpopular and so poor that you can't get out of it.
Oh, I had a thought.
What's that?
Well, you know how we revere astronauts?
Yeah.
Endorsement deals.
Oh, yeah.
See?
Get a Kerbal Hut. Sticker on the side of the rocket.
Well, that, or for example, Jebediah could endorse the Moho chocolate drink. He could get big bucks that way and plow them into contracts.
Yeah.
And nobody's thought of that.
Okay, next one is Dolphier says, I'd rather they revamp existing planets to make them more than one uniform terrain, map, and texture. Add interesting things to them. I can add as many generic red, purple, blue, green, brown, gray spheres as I want using mods.
Yeah, do you know where that came from? Somebody had speculated.
Yeah, that there would be new planets.
They would add new planets.
Yeah, I think it's in one of these other ones that was quoted. I just shortened it.
Okay.
So, yeah, Yeah,
You skipped?
I skipped.
You skipped that part?
Herb 8.
That was the most important part of the whole... No, I'm kidding. Go
Herb
ahead.
8 says, I really wish we could get reputation for just doing normal missions. Like, let's say you land and you recover stuff, and we get a little bit of reputation. So for like every, 10 science, you would get 1 reputation or something.
Basically, everything you do
Yeah.
earns you reputation.
Mr. Magpie says, I've always wanted to be able to do stuff inside the crafts we make. Actually float around inside one of our stations, any of the stuff that you build.
I would like that, too.
I'd also love a science minigame where you have to conduct experiments, but not as bothered by that.
Right.
Okay, so the science minigame. If you've ever played Viva Pinata on the Xbox...
Oh, that's a disturbing game.
Yeah, if you've ever played Viva Pinata, the first one, the economy is pretty much built on these little orange worms. These little orange worms that crawl around. Everything eats them, so they're pretty much like the basis of life in Viva Pinata.
Right.
In order to get those little jerks to mate and make more worms so they can eat those stupid things, you have to do the mating game, where you are given this really stupid, simple maze, and you have to navigate it. The problem is, after you do it the first time, it's the same every time after that. So you play this mini game and you're like, I just want this over with. I just want more stupid worms. Right. How come I have to interject in their love life every time I want to feed my other pinatas? That's what I fear on if they made a science mini game to collect science. Every time you did it, is it going to be this little like, oh, I got to do this thing again?
Yeah.
Or is it you can do this to gain extra science, but if you're really tired of this mini game, don't bother. So
yeah, it's like Mass Effect has mini games like to unlock things and stuff like that.
Yeah, and sometimes like when it first starts, like whenever you're hacking in BioShock or something, you're like, oh, okay, no big deal. It's kind of fun. It's kind of whatever. And then eventually you're like, this is a low level hack. It should just kind of do itself at some point. Yeah.
Well, I like the way Mass Effect handles it, which is basically, in many instances they say, you can do the mini game and get, this much, or you can just click the skip button and you get like 50% less. So it gives you the option of skipping, but there's a penalty for skipping.
Yeah, there was in Dungeons and Dragons, whenever you have to roll a 20-sided die to complete something, let's say you need to get a 10, and you can do it one of two ways. Like, let's say if something's chasing you and you have a limited amount of time, you roll it and you take it. Like whatever you rolled. If you rolled a 9, you failed, or if you rolled anything 10 or above, you succeed. Well, there's also taking 20, which if you have the time and there's nothing interrupting you and there's no penalty for it, you can automatically take a 20 on the die.
Right.
Saying that you just took a lot of time to do it. So, it's like, oh, I'm picking this lock. It's like, okay, well, the guard's rounding the corner. Well, you need to roll. Oh, I'm picking this lock. Okay, you're in a room by yourself in your own house. You can take 20. So it's...
Right.
Whenever it comes to something like urgent, I understand you have to do it. But whenever it's like, well, all this is going to do is take my own time. Well, you could be able to just fast track it and suffer any penalty that you want. But at least you don't have to get those worms to crawl through that stupid maze anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you did the Reddit speculation about what's going to be in 0.25, because there's an article I've got, and this is from PCGamesN.com, and they have some details about 0.25 as well. The name of the article is, Here's What to Expect from Kerbal Space Program 0.25. First, the update will introduce the administration building, a new facility at the Space Center. It doesn't introduce it, but it changes the features. A new facility that allows players to specialize by choosing from a number of different strategies. These strategies will boost certain resources at the expense of others. For example, the unpaid internship program will give you a better science yield while hurting your reputation. I guess that's being cheap and not paying your interns. Conversely, adopting the open source technologies initiative will give you a better reputation while decreasing your science rewards. The update will also overhaul particle and sound effects, so expect improved rocket trails and better sounding explosions. And as Max Maps told us, they're adding the Spaceplane Plus mod. They're doing their version of the enhanced nav ball markers on the nav ball.
I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. According to the article, difficulty settings are getting their own panel. The option to revert to the launch pad can be disabled, and your starting funds in career mode can be boosted. And then, of course, there's the one last mysterious feature, which we have no idea is what it's going to be, but that's in the plans.
You know, I was just going back to thinking about Kerbal's leveling up and getting experience and things. Mm-hmm. I think they could counter it by having them want a sign-on bonus. So, like, the one that gives you extra science, like, you have to actually, you put him into the pod, and you actually have to pay him some money. So, you know, if he dies, you also lose the money or whatever, and you lose that money anyway.
I like the endorsement deals better.
Well, I mean, you know, that could earn you money back.
Or your money
But your
back.
reputation goes down, definitely.
You get your money back.
Hey, it's from Peekaboo.
All right.
With Nas's high Kerbal count. Okay,
I wanted you to read this one.
I didn't even know. Okay.
This is funny.
With Nas's high Kerbal count, I thought you might find this mod interesting.
Kerbal death count, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, because I killed 13 in one shot.
Yeah.
The Eterno Arrest 2000 Coffin mod lets you commemorate your fallen Kerbals in a dignified manner or blow them up again. Yeah, you can find it on the Curse site. Look up Eterno Arrest 2000 Coffin mod. Breathe deep and fly high.
There you go. You need that because you're killing Kerbals.
Yeah.
Okay, last letter. Hey, it's MittenPo85 again.
Oh, hey.
I managed to complete the challenge from Shea, and I wish to share it with you guys. The challenge for the week was make a space station at geosynchronous orbit with the required attachments. And it required 10 launches to accomplish, 157 million funds to complete, 782 parts, and a total mass of, if I'm reading this correctly, 109,600 tons.
Wow.
Orbiting Kerbin at 2893 kilometers. It has the following attachments: a power station with batteries that store enough power for the dark hours, crew habitation module with capacity for 20 Kerbals, escape pods. That's something I've never thought of.
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty
Just
cool
load up in
idea.
them.
Yeah.
And now since crew transfer is going to be in the new things, it's a lot easier to okay, go to the escape pod and you, launch them off.
Yeah, it's like the station's exploding and you have to EVA to get to the escape pod.
Yeah.
Let's see. Science Bay, communication tower, refueling station, docking ports, and the SCV, which is the Space Construction Vehicle. And then the challenge called for something to set the station apart from the others. And this is what he did. It has the beautiful rainbow-colored solar array. And when you see the station from afar, it looks like a flower. Cute or what? Only stock parts were used. He's made a video for the project. And he wants us to share it, which we have. We tweeted it out.
Okay.
And it's going to be, we'll put it on the website as well. Thanks again for a great podcast. Well, thanks for the great letter.
Yeah, that thing was massive.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the picture of it, and I was like, it's huge.
Yeah, I wondered if you'd seen that picture.
Yeah.
That thing is massive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's got, like little fingers and things sticking out in every direction.
Like, as updates happen and more functionalities increase to them, they'll update too because they'll just have the new features. So,
right.
You built the space station because it was cool, and then, you come to find out they had an update, and it's like, oh, well, now that just became way more useful.
Yeah. Well, that's the earlier letter talked about being able to actually do stuff inside the ships and the space stations. That would be so cool because right now, when you go to the internal view, for example, if you're in the habitation module, your view is you're strapped into a seat and you can look around, but you can't move around.
Yeah.
And it would be really cool to be able to build a spaceship and actually move through it. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I immediately think of Sandra Bullock in Gravity, moving through the Russian space station.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty accurate example, too, how things went.
Yeah.
So.
Of course, then again, me thinking about Sandra Bullock is pretty commonplace. So. Well, let's move on. That does it for our mission briefing, which brings us to our next edition of Modder's Minute from DK.
All right, guys, now we are getting into some mods that move away from the stock game experience. That being said, I can't recommend this mod enough. We're talking about Kerbal Engineer Redux. This mod is all about data, both before and after launch. All you need to do is add one part to your rocket and you'll have just about all the telemetry you could want. In the vehicle assembly building, this mod will give you a thrust-to-weight ratio and a delta-V readout for each stage. In addition to being able to make sure that you'll reach your destination, you'll also be able to make sure that you have enough thrust to get off the planet once you're there. In flight, you'll have access to readouts and data that you didn't even know you wanted. There's a lot of telemetry, but I've only got a minute, so I'm going to highlight a few of these. You get access to how much delta-V you have left in your current stage, your apoapsis and periapsis height, your timed apoapsis and periapsis, your orbital inclination, eccentricity, and period, vertical and horizontal speeds, the biome you are currently over, the biome you're going to land on, the slope of the surface you're going to land on, your impact time. When you're trying to rendezvous, you get your current phase angle, intercept angle, ejection angle, and relative inclination. There's just so much data that you get access to with the click of a single button. There's a lot of mods that will give you similar telemetry readouts, but this one is by far my favorite. It can take away from some of the trial and error that you get with the vanilla game, so for purists, it might be best to avoid this one. That being said, I for one really like to take away some of the trial and error out of my game. Well, maybe just the error.
All right, thank you again, DK with Modder's Minute. Don't forget, he has a Twitch TV channel, Declarations. That's DKLARATIONS. And also, we posted a link to this in our last one, but he's got a YouTube series that he's beginning.
Yeah.
Tutorial for beginners.
That was a great video.
That was very good.
Yeah, because it was stuff that I had done. Like, it was something I understood.
Yeah.
But seeing it explained in, like, a good pace and, like, with a lot of,
on-screen text.
Yeah, dude, really good
animations.
editing. It looked really good.
Oh, it was honestly, I wish something like that had been available back when I started.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it is short. It's to the point. He says, this is the topic, and that's what he talks about.
Uh-huh.
It isn't an hour of, okay, first I'm going to build the ship, and then I'm going to get it in orbit, and then finally the part that you were looking for, is an hour and a half in.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's one of the best videos, best tutorial videos out there.
Yeah.
So
he's not paying us.
Yeah, he's not paying us.
He's not paying us.
Although he should.
Everyone should.
Everyone should send us money. Okay, we're going to move on now to But I Digress. And this is the part of the program where we talk about non-Kerbal stuff. Typically, we have talked about like space movies and we've talked about space history. But today, we're going to do something very different.
Yeah.
Because Nos has a big announcement, and I am going to shut my mouth and let you talk.
Okay, so if you listen to previous episodes, half the time that I've said I've only gotten an hour or so into the game, that week, I said because I'm working on a lot of design projects. If you listened to a couple episodes ago, I talked about how I'm really big into board games, and I, like collect and play and design some.
And you'd gone to the board gaming convention.
Yeah, I went to the largest board game convention in North America, maybe the world, because attendance has been skyrocketing there, Gen Con in Indianapolis. There are a lot of major publishers that are at these things, and that's a good way to meet them and maybe get your game published. Mm-hmm. I was involved in an event called Designer Publisher Speed Dating, where I would sit at a table with my game, and every 6 minutes I would get a new publisher that would sit down, and I had that much time to pitch my game.
How many lap dances did you have to do?
All of them. I had 6 minutes, I only needed 30 seconds.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's my other slogan. Sorry, I sidetracked you.
So I was meeting a lot of publishers, and it was really fun, and as it went through, eventually one group of publishers, they contacted me, and we now have a contract set. The publisher is Mayday Games. Games that they have made are Bling Bling Gemstone, Coconuts. Their most, one of their big famous ones is Get Bit. There's also Walk the Plank. They just finished a Kickstarter for Dead Man's Draw, which it looks really good.
Okay.
And
this is so cool. You created a game and it's going to be published.
Yeah, and it's going to be published by Mayday Games.
Yes. What's the name of the game?
The name of the game is Garbage Day.
Garbage Day!
The premise of the game is you're all roommates, and you are trying to... the trash needs to be taken out, because it's piling up. And you still have things you got to throw away, and the trash is overflowing on the can. Well, you're trying to avoid taking out the trash because you're lazy. But you still have stuff to throw away, and you're hoping that somebody else will do it.
And there's an actual trash can.
Yeah, there's a physical trash can.
Like plastic?
Yeah, it's a plastic trash can. And cards, you have cards that you play on top of the trash can. As cards are played, they're laid on top of the trash can with two corners hanging off. Mm-hmm. So it starts to branch out, and you have like this basically, it's almost like blooming like a flower of cards just expanding off the top of this. Mm-hmm. And you have, on your turn, you have cards, and you can either throw them away, which is put them on top of the pile like that, or you can hoard things in your room. If you put it in your room, that means you don't have to put anything on that pile, and you can put things in your room, or you can move things from your room to other people's rooms with action cards.
Question.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get a mental picture of this. Is there a trash can in the middle of like a board?
Okay, so there is no actual board.
There's no actual board.
Just in between all the players, there's a plastic trash can.
Gotcha.
And you place a card on top of it.
I'm guessing about the size of a drinking glass.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. And the trash can has a lid on it.
Okay.
So whenever you put things on, whenever you put a card on, it is sitting like horizontal with the table.
Okay.
And two corners are hanging off. I realize this is really weird to explain. It's like
the trash Jenga.
Yeah. And so
because you're stacking cards.
Yeah, and those cards have to be further out.
Right.
And so eventually these cards get an unstable length from there. So the main thing I tried to get with the game is a blend of strategy and dexterity. Mm-hmm. So there's the dexterity, kind of like Jenga or anything, where you don't want these things to fall over. A steady hand is going to help you, or like being able to gauge the parts of the pile that are like steady enough to place cards on.
You're not removing cards and restack.
Sometimes you are.
Sometimes you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes people will play cards on you that would make you do that, which can get very risky.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you can mess with other players.
Yeah, you can mess with other players. So you can, let's say you're good at playing dexterity moves, you can just stack them on top of the trash can. If you're not good at that, let's say you got shaky hands or you're just real nervous about it, or the pile's just unstable no matter how good you are, you can play cards on other people to have them do it instead. Mm-hmm. And those cards that you put in your room, if your room gets too full, you have to put all the cards on top of the pile. So the story of the game, the story of how it came to be, is
the genesis of the game.
Yeah, I was trying to design a game, and I've been trying to do this for years. And the premise of the game was there was a cabin in the middle of the woods, and like there were zombies coming toward the cabin, and you had to survive one night, like fighting off all the zombies. Mm-hmm. And the game was just like, there was all this graph paper and all these charts I was writing, and it was like, what if they approach from this? And it got so complicated. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, oh man, this is not any fun to play. If anyone watches Parks and Rec, it was very close to Cones of Dunshire. It was just this exercise in like overcomplication. I was like, oh man, this is stupid. And I got so tired of it. Which is actually funny because a couple years later, a company made a game like that. Mm-hmm. And it was way better than the game I was making. So, power to you. I got sick of this thing, and I just crumple up the board, like this paper mat that I was using as a board. I crumple it up, crumple everything up, and I said, there's no way I'm going to make this. This game's awful. And I go to throw it away, and the trash can was piled up high. And I said, well, I know my roommate wakes up before I do tomorrow, and tomorrow's trash day. So if I just put this on here, and nothing falls over, he'll do it.
And a shaft of light
came
from the heavens,
the
angels sang.
So I put the trash on there, because if it would have fallen over, I would have cleaned it up, because I would have been responsible for it.
Right.
It's kind of like the last chip in the bag. Whoever ate that one ate them all, Or
it's like the coffee pot.
Yeah.
It's like at the office. If you leave just enough in there, you don't have to make more.
It was shot glass worth of coffee means I didn't empty the pot.
Right.
And so it's like, I just set it on there. And I was like, that's it. And so I started working on it, and that was about 4 years ago.
Do you have an idea as to where it'll be available?
Hobby game shops will be able to carry it or order it. You can order it from Mayday's website whenever it comes out. Okay. And, just from then on, some retailers could choose to take it, like if Mayday does any deals with like a Toys R Us or a Target or something.
Well, I know Barnes & Nobles has...
Yeah, they started a hobby board gaming section. So it kind of depends on how big it gets, whether or not those big retailers will pick it up. But hobby game stores, like you can definitely find those, and they'll do it.
Hey, I have a suggestion that I guarantee would not only double but probably triple or quadruple your sales.
What is that?
The final rule of the game is once all the cards have fallen, the person who lost has to scoop it all up and put it in the trash.
Like throw the game away?
Throw the game away.
Oh, so they have to buy another
and
copy?
they have to go buy another copy. Think of how much money you could make off of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like whenever they put lather, rinse, repeat on shampoo bottle, like they noticed a double in sales because like people would repeat the process and use twice as much.
And there's really no advantage to lather, rinse, repeat.
No.
I mean, lather, rinse once is enough.
Yeah. What's funny is I always worry about the person who, like, they didn't know how many times to repeat it, so they just kept doing it. They're like, when do I stop? My hair's falling out.
Okay, can I do a digress right in the middle of digress?
All right, what is that?
This is a true story. This happened years ago, okay? A friend of mine and I, we were roommates, okay? And we had a rule. When you used a plate, bowl, or a pot, or a pan, or whatever, you had to wash it, and you had to put it away. So I come home one day, and there, sitting in the sink, I think it was a pot, it may have been a plate, but it was something, and there was water on it. Someone had, used it, put it in the sink, and put water on it, and then left.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it begins.
Well, he comes home, and I said, hey, dirty dish in the sink. I didn't do that, is what he says to me. And I'm like, okay, there's two people.
That narrows it down to what?
Yeah, there's two people. There's you and me. And he says, no, that's not mine. I didn't do that. And I said, it's not mine. So what ensued was this battle of wills where the sink started overflowing because neither one of us would wash anything and put it away.
Yeah.
This went on to where we had nothing left. We had stacks of dirty dishes and pots and everything. It spilled out of the kitchen into the dining room. We had stuff stacked up on the dining room table.
Wow.
And this finally...
does this lead up to you guys both being evicted?
Honestly, it should have.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, cockroaches probably would have evicted us at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about slob city.
It is squalor.
Yeah. And so finally what happened is one day we just made this agreement that somebody had used that plate and not washed it, but it wasn't either one of us. And we spent an entire Saturday cleaning every dish and pot and pan in the house.
Wow.
And it was that same thing where it was, we didn't, it was that same battle of wills.
Yeah.
Where, well, if you're not going to wash your dish, I'm not going to wash mine.
I'm going to stop bathing.
Yeah.
It's like why?
Anyway, so
I think anyone who's been roommates with anyone has gone through some sort of situation like that. You're just like, it's your turn to vacuum. No, I did it last week. Like, no, that thing's still there. It's like, why is it there if you didn't vacuum it?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm thinking about it now, years later, and I'm thinking to myself, why didn't you just shut your mouth and wash the dish and just end it right there?
Or just continue washing your dishes and let it sit there till they did it or something. But
it was one of the dumbest arguments, but I guess it yielded a good story. So whatever. Well, again, I want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, it's very difficult to accomplish something like this. I don't think people realize just how difficult it is, and it's also a lot of work.
Yeah.
So
it was. There were a lot of hours put into even minuscule parts.
Well, keep us updated. I want to let us know kind of when it's coming out and
so the current working name is Garbage Day, but that is subject to change.
Okay. Well, you have one customer right here for sure. I'm going to run out and buy it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that we're done with But I Digress, and we're going to close things out. We have another challenge this week from Shea. Shea Byram gives us a new challenge every week, and this one, I think this is going to be one of the most difficult ones he's tossed out. Okay? He says, my next challenge, unlike my last few, is not one done in space. Instead, a vertical takeoff and landing used on Kerbal. Rules. Number 1, the vertical takeoff and landing, or VTOL, must use air-breathing engines. Number 2, the VTOL must have forward-facing engines, meaning it must work like a normal plane after takeoff. Number 3, the VTOL must have a small rover attached somewhere. I told you, this is...
Wow.
Yeah. Number 4, Try to be original. Breathe deep and fly high.
The closest I came is remember whenever I made a space plane and I put Cybertrons all along the sides to just shoot it straight up in the air. It vertically took off.
Yeah.
For
you got that part down.
For a couple seconds, and then it hit the ground.
Well, vertical is such a relative term.
Yeah. So some parts went up, some parts went down.
As always, if you want to do the Shea Challenge, and remember, all of the challenges are basically always going. There's 3 out there now.
Yeah, so if you do any of the previous ones, we like to see those too.
Yeah. Send us, if you don't mind, send us either screenshots or video links or whatever, or just write us and describe your experience with the challenge. But we would love to hear from you. We love your letters. We love your suggestions. Any feedback. Our email address is kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, it's @Kerbalcast. And if you send us screenshots or whatever, we will retweet the screenshots, and we'll talk you up real big.
Yeah.
Anytime we do that, I would ask, if you don't mind, please retweet those and favorite those for our contest. What I won't say winners, I guess, accomplishers, or contest accomplishers.
Yeah, for posterity's sake.
For posterity's sake. But spread the love. And thank you so much to Shea for doing that, for providing us with another challenge. We actually have quite a few people to thank this week.
Yeah, so we want to thank our listeners. That includes all of our regular contributors. And we also want to give a thanks to all the new listeners that we've gotten since, the massive Max Maps episode.
Yes. And thank you, Max Maps, for allowing that to happen.
Yeah.
Also, a big thank you to our segment providers, DK, for the Modder's Minute. And remember, he has a Twitch TV channel, Declarations. And, of course, Dark Mushroom for providing Dark Matters. Next podcast will be part 2 of his 3-part series on Rendezvous.
We also want to thank the folks at Squad for providing us with this amazing game and for all of their continued support.
And the Redditors. The Redditors. I made a new word.
Yeah.
Yay! No, the sub-modded Reddit... I made another word.
Redderators.
The Redderator. The sub-Redderators.
Yeah.
The sub-Moderatorators. Okay, I'm going to wrestle this sentence to the ground. We want to thank the moderators from the subreddits, Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy. They have links to us on the front page. Yay! Yeah. I got through the sentence.
And also thank you to KSB Testing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And all of the music that you've heard is from Professor Soap. You can find him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, or you can download episodes directly from kerbalpodcast.libsyn.com. Apparently, episode 6 is really good. You might want to check it out.
If you guys want to give Canada a run for its money.
Yeah, there you go. Well, until next time, I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and our CMP, Command Module Pilot
Nostromo.
May you always have a star to steer by and enough fuel to get you home. Until next time, happy Kerbaling. Well, to quote the Blame Canada song, when Canada is dead and gone, there will be no more Celine Dion. Yeah, just the one click.
Just the one click.
Just the one click.
Just one. It's never enough.
Oh, the shark deer has big teeth, dear, and he shows them. You know this song.
No.
You've never heard Mac the Knife?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, the shark deer has big teeth, dear. Bobby Darin?
No.
Wow.
I didn't even know who that is.
Oh, my God.
I was born in 87.
He's Mac the Knife.
Chubby Checker. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. Are you calling me fat?
There's a lot of telemetry, but I've only got a minute, so I'm going to highlight a few of these. You get access to how much delta V you have left in your current stage, your apoapsis and periapsis height, your timed apoapsis and periapsis, your orbital inclination, eccentricity, and period, vertical and horizontal speeds, the biome you are currently over, the biome you're going to land on, the slope of the surface you're going to land on, your impact time. When you're trying to rendezvous, you get your current phase angle, intercept angle, ejection angle, and relative inclination. There's just so much data that you get access to with the click of a single button.
A moho is the hardest place in the biggest rocket I ever built could barely get a lander onto moho. You have a problem with me talking like this?
Closer and farther and closer and farther.
I'm a wiggler.
You're a wiggler.
Experienced
Oh, that's something they could add to the game. Pon farr. And that, it was like...
Yeah, you had this like cycle of inbreeding.
Yeah, it's like... you're like brothers and sisters.
Yeah, it's like...
Stop that! Once again, well, we'll see. I have to kind of think of my sign out here.
Day 8 on Cookie Planet. The 2% milk didn't arrive. What we got was something much worse. The word alone drives Jenkins crazy, but the kind of milk we got was chocolate.
Did you say chocolate?
Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate! Chocolate!